Welcome to tonight's story. Find yourself a comfortable position. Let your shoulders drop. Let the day fall away from you like a coat you've been wearing too long. Tonight, we're going to peel back the marble facade of the most famous murder in human history. The world has always been dazzled by the drama of the Ides of March, the gleaming daggers, the toga soaked in blood, the immortal last words. But very few people are willing to look at the night before. The long, strange, sleepless night of March 14th, 44 BC, when a man who had conquered the known world lay in his bed in Rome and made the single most catastrophic decision of his life. He chose to go. That choice, that one quiet, fatal decision made in the dark hours before dawn, would end an era, ignite a civil war, and echo through 2,000 years of human civilization. So tonight we begin not with daggers. We begin with darkness. We begin with a man alone in a room listening to his wife weep. Let us first understand what Julius Caesar was on the night of March 14th, 44 BC. He was 55 years old. In the ancient world, this was not young. The roads he had walked, the campaigns he had fought, the fevers he had survived in the swamps of Gaul and the deserts of Egypt, they had carved themselves into his body like signatures. He suffered from epilepsy, a condition the Romans called the sacred disease, a term that was equal parts reverence and fear. His joints ached in cold weather. His once sharp eyes had begun to require scrolls to be held at a particular angle in certain light. And yet, he was the most powerful man in the world. Think about what that phrase actually means. Not powerful in the way a wealthy merchant is powerful, or in the way a popular senator is powerful. Powerful in the absolute, terrifying, almost incomprehensible sense of the word. He had spent the last decade methodically dismantling every institution and tradition that had kept Rome balanced. The Republic, that ancient experiment in shared governance that the Romans treated as something close to sacred, and he had replaced it with one thing: himself. He held the title of Dictator Perpetuo, Dictator in perpetuity, not a temporary emergency appointment, which is what Roman dictators were supposed to be. Not a 6-month grant of absolute power during a crisis, after which a man was expected to lay down his authority and return to civilian life, as Cincinnatus had done, as Sulla had attempted and failed to do. No, Caesar had abolished the expiration date. He was dictator forever. As long as he breathed, Rome was his. He had conquered Gaul, which was more or less the entirety of modern-day France, Belgium, and Switzerland, adding millions of people and thousands of miles of territory to Roman control in a decade of brutal, brilliant warfare. He had crossed the Rubicon, which every schoolchild in the Western world now knows as a metaphor, but which was, in that moment, simply an act of breathtaking audacity. A general marching his army toward his own capital city, daring a civilization to stop him. He had chased his rival Pompey across the Mediterranean and watched him die on an Egyptian beach. He had taken Cleopatra as his lover, a union so electric with consequence and symbolism that even now it feels less like history and more like myth. He had, in short, done everything. And here is the psychological trap that springs on every man who has done everything. Here is the quiet, terrifying room that every conqueror eventually finds himself standing in, alone, with no more territory left on the map. What do you do next? Caesar had an answer. He had always had an answer. He was already planning his next campaign. A massive eastern expedition against the Parthian Empire, the one great military prize that had eluded Rome, the empire that had humiliated his old ally Crassus and left Roman legionary standards rotting in foreign hands. He was going to retrieve those standards. He was going to march east and accomplish what Alexander the Great had accomplished, but from the opposite direction. He was going to make himself not just the master of the known world, but the remaker of it. He was going to leave Rome in 6 days. 6 days. That number is important. Hold it in your mind. He was also, according to whispers that fluttered through the marble hallways and the crowded forums of Rome like nervous birds, considering whether to take a formal title that the Republic had never allowed any man to hold. A title that was simple, ancient, and absolutely forbidden. Rex, King. This was the word that turned his allies into conspirators. This was the word that transformed men who had fought beside him, men who owed him their careers and their lives, into men who could hold a knife. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. On the night of March 14th, 44 BC, Julius Caesar did not yet know any of this. Or perhaps, and this is the question that has haunted historians for 2,000 years, perhaps he did. Caesar was not a man who ignored intelligence. He was, above almost everything else, a man of extraordinary perception. His military genius was not simply tactical, it was perceptual. He had an almost supernatural ability to read situations, to sense the shape of things before they fully materialized, to understand what his enemies would do before they did it. So why did he walk into the Senate on March 15th? To answer that, we have to first understand how many people had tried to tell him not to. The warnings had been arriving for weeks, like letters piling up on a table from a correspondent you've decided to ignore. There was Sprinna, an old hairuspex, a Roman priest whose specific function was to read omens, who had approached Caesar in the forum not long before and told him, with the calm certainty of a man delivering a weather report, that he should beware the Ides of March. This was not a vague prophecy. This was not the sort of misty, interpretable oracle that could mean a dozen different things. March 15th. Beware it. Caesar, when he encountered Sprinna again on the morning of March 15th, would reportedly say to him with a kind of cheerful dismissal, "The Ides of March have come." Meaning, look, old man, your deadline has arrived and nothing has happened to me. To which Sprinna reportedly replied, with a composure that makes your blood run cold even now, "Aye, Caesar, but they have not yet gone. But we're still in the night before, and the warnings were still arriving." There were the persistent rumors moving through the streets of Rome. Not whispers, but something louder, something that the servants heard, that the merchants discussed, that the slaves carried between households in the way that slaves always carry the true information of a city. People were going to kill Caesar. People were meeting in secret. People were sharpening something. There were the letters. According to the ancient historian Suetonius, Caesar was handed a letter that evening, pressed into his hand by a man who urged him urgently to read it. The letter reportedly contained, in explicit detail, the names of the conspirators and the outline of the plot. Caesar did not read it. He tucked it under his arm, beneath several other scrolls and documents that required his attention, and carried it with him. He never opened it. Why? There are several possible explanations, and all of them reveal something true and devastating about the man. The first is simply practical distraction. Caesar was managing an empire from his personal correspondence, and the evening before his scheduled Senate appearance was not a quiet night. But this explanation is too generous, too innocent. It does not account for the quality of the man's attention. The second explanation is darker. Caesar had been warned so many times before about so many plots that had never materialized, about so many rivals who had crumbled before they could strike, that the warnings had begun to lose their weight. He had survived everything. He had always survived everything. A man who has cheated death enough times begins, without realizing it, to believe that death has simply decided to skip him. He begins to mistake his extraordinary luck for invulnerability. The third explanation is the one that keeps scholars awake. Some historians believe that Caesar, on some level, knew, that he understood, in the deep, intuitive part of himself that had always been 10 minutes ahead of everyone else in the room, that something was being planned, and that he chose to go anyway, not out of ignorance or arrogance, but out of a kind of exhausted defiance, as if he were saying, "Fine, come then, see what happens." We will never know with certainty which of these is true. Perhaps all three were true simultaneously. Great men rarely act from simple motives. What we know is this. On the night of March 14th, as the city of Rome settled into its night sounds, the creaking of cartwheels that were only allowed through the streets after dark, the distant calls of the watchman, the flicker of torchlight on plastered walls. Julius Caesar went home to the house on the Palatine Hill that he shared with his third wife Calpurnia, and he did not read the letter. Here is where the night becomes something more than history. Here is where it becomes human. Calpurnia Pisonis was Caesar's third wife, and by all historical accounts she was different from his previous wives in one significant way. She appears to have genuinely loved him, not the position, not the power, the man. This is a distinction worth pausing over, because Julius Caesar was a man who generated enormous amounts of passion in people, but very little of it was directed at him personally. They loved what he represented. They loved what he could do for them. They loved the idea of being close to the fire. Calpurnia, it seems, loved the person. She was also, on the night of March 14th, desperately afraid. Ancient sources tell us that she dreamed. She dreamed of blood. She dreamed of the pediment of their house collapsing, the carved ornamental peak above their doorway that Caesar had been granted permission to add as a mark of honor, crashing down into the street. She dreamed of her husband in her arms, dying. She woke from these dreams in the dark hours of the night and could not return to sleep. Now, let us think about what this moment means. Not the dream itself, not whether dreams have prophetic validity, but the human architecture of this scene. A powerful woman in a large house in the most powerful city in the world, sitting up in the darkness after a nightmare, listening to her own heartbeat, trying to decide whether to wake her husband. She did wake him, and this is the moment that the entire night pivots around, because what followed was one of the most extraordinary arguments in recorded history. Calpurnia begged Caesar not to go to the Senate meeting, not to reschedule it, not to delay it, not to send a representative in his place. She begged him to cancel it entirely. She told him about her dreams. She told him what she had seen. And according to multiple ancient sources, Plutarch, Suetonius, Appian, Caesar listened to her. He looked at his wife, this woman who was not given to hysterics, who was not a dramatic or superstitious woman by the accounts of those who knew her, and he heard something in her voice that moved him. He agreed. Julius Caesar, dictator perpetuo, master of the known world, decided that morning that he was not going to the Senate. He would send word. He would say he was unwell. There would be other days. Let that land for a moment. He almost didn't go. Think about what that means. Think about how many of us have had a morning where something felt wrong, where we almost didn't get in the car, almost didn't take that flight, almost didn't walk into that meeting. And then something small and seemingly reasonable happened, and we went anyway. Caesar was that close to a different history. This is the part that the history books skim over too quickly. because it complicates the clean narrative of noble Brutus and honorable sacrifice and the death of the Republic. The part they skim over is this: it was not Brutus who ultimately convinced Caesar to go to the Senate on March 15th. It was a man named Decimus Junius Brutus Albinus. You may not recognize the name. History has buried him beneath the more famous Brutus, Marcus Junius Brutus, the one Shakespeare immortalized, the one Caesar supposedly addressed with his dying breath. But Decimus is, in many ways, the more fascinating and more chilling figure of the two, precisely because of how close he was to Caesar, and precisely because of what he did with that closeness. Decimus was one of Caesar's most trusted generals. He was not simply an ally or a political supporter. He was a man who had commanded legions in Caesar's name, who had won victories in Caesar's campaigns, who had been given provinces and appointments and trust. The deep, personal trust that Caesar extended to very few people. Caesar had in his will named Decimus as a secondary heir. Secondary heir. If Caesar's primary heir died, Decimus would inherit, and Decimus was one of the leading conspirators. He had been a part of the plot since its earliest days, working alongside Cassius and the other Brutus, bringing his organizational skills and his access to Caesar's innermost circle to the planning of the assassination. He is, in the cold mathematics of betrayal, perhaps the most complete traitor in the group, because he had more to betray. When word reached the conspirators that morning that Caesar was not coming, that he had sent a message saying he was unwell, that the Senate meeting should be postponed, the conspiracy very nearly fell apart in real time. The tension among the plotters reached a kind of explosive pitch. Some wanted to abandon the plan entirely for that day and wait for another opportunity. Some worried that the delay meant the plot had been discovered. Others were simply terrified, as men who have spent weeks working themselves up to an act of violence are terrified when the moment suddenly retreats, because courage of that dark variety does not keep well. It was Cassius who reportedly said what everyone in the room was thinking: if Caesar does not come today, what do we do tomorrow, and the day after? They were men living on borrowed time, committed to a plan that got more dangerous with every passing hour that it remained unexecuted. Every day was another day in which someone might talk, another day in which Caesar might discover them, another day in which the 6-day countdown to his Parthian departure, after which he would leave Rome for potentially years, surrounded by loyal legions completely inaccessible, would tick one digit closer to zero. They needed Caesar in that Senate chamber, that day, that morning. And so they sent Decimus. Here is what we know about that conversation, pieced together from the ancient sources. Decimus arrived at Caesar's house. He was let in. Of course he was let in. He was one of Caesar's most trusted men. He found Caesar in a state of indecision, influenced by Calpurnia's evident distress, contemplating staying home. And Decimus Brutus, with a calm that must have required every ounce of self-control he possessed, began to talk. He told Caesar that the Senate had assembled specifically to offer him an extraordinary honor. Some sources suggest he said it was the offer of a formal kingship, not the word rex, which had too much baggage, but a formalized grant of royal power over Rome's territories outside of Italy, a compromise that had been discussed among Caesar's allies as a way to give him the title he wanted without triggering the final constitutional rupture. Whether this was true or a deliberate manipulation hardly matters. It was designed to hit the precise pressure point it needed to hit. Then Decimus said something more devastating. He told Caesar to imagine what it would look like if he simply didn't come. Hundreds of senators assembled. The session called for a specific purpose, and Julius Caesar, the most powerful man in the world, staying home because his wife had a bad dream. He let that image sit in the air between them. He said, or something very close to this, that the senators would say Caesar had sent them all away as a joke, that they would go home offended, saying that this was the behavior of a tyrant, not a leader, that his enemies would use this moment to argue that he was no longer fit to rule. This was not a political argument. This was a vanity argument. And Caesar, for all his genius, was a man of extraordinary vanity, as perhaps all great conquerors must be. You cannot believe yourself capable of reshaping the world without an enormous investment in your own importance. Decimus struck that investment with a single precise blow. Caesar looked at Calpurnia, and according to the sources, he said something to her that was gentler than one might expect from a man of his temperament. He acknowledged that her fears were understandable. He said he could not let it be said of him that he hid at home from a woman's dream. He got dressed. He got into his litter. He was carried through the streets of Rome toward the theatre of Pompey, where the Senate was meeting that day, because the Curia, the Senate's traditional meeting place, was under repair. He was going toward the men who were going to kill him. Let us talk about the conspirators for a moment. Not to romanticize them, history has done quite enough of that, but to understand what they actually were, because understanding what they were helps us understand what Caesar was walking into. There were approximately 60 men involved in the conspiracy to various degrees. 60. This is not a small, secretive cell of idealistic revolutionaries. This is a significant portion of the Roman Senate, and the fact that 60 men managed to keep this secret through weeks of planning, through the nerve-shredding tension of the days immediately before, is itself remarkable and says something important about the quality of Caesar's intelligence network, or perhaps about his willingness to use it against his own colleagues. The two primary architects were Gaius Cassius Longinus and Marcus Junius Brutus. Cassius is the easier of the two to understand. He was a man who had opposed Caesar for years, who had fought on Pompey's side in the civil war, who'd been pardoned by Caesar with the generosity that Cassius apparently found more humiliating than gratitude-inducing. He hated Caesar with the hot, clarifying hatred of a man who's been forced to be grateful to someone he despises. His motivations were personal and political in equal measure, and he did not pretend otherwise. He believed that a Rome ruled by one man was a Rome diminished, and he believed that he, Cassius, deserved to be among the men who ruled it collectively. Brutus is more complex. Brutus actually was the noble figure that Shakespeare paints, in the sense that he genuinely believed in the Republic as an ideal, genuinely wrestled with what he was planning, genuinely suffered over it. He was Caesar's close friend. He was, and this is the part that Caesar himself may have believed, possibly his son. The affair between Caesar and Brutus's mother, Servilia, had been one of the defining relationships of Caesar's younger life. Whether Brutus was the biological product of it is unverifiable, but Caesar's particular affection for Brutus, his indulgence of Brutus in ways he did not indulge others, suggests he believed the possibility. Brutus knew this. He must have known this. And he went forward anyway. Because Brutus had decided, and this is the decision that defines him and damns him in equal measure, that his love for the idea of Rome was greater than his love for any individual Roman, even this one, even the man who might have been his father. This is the kind of conviction that looks like nobility from certain angles and looks like monstrous self-deception from others. History cannot quite decide which one it is. Perhaps it is both. The other 58 conspirators were a mixture of old Republican idealists, personal enemies of Caesar, opportunists who had calculated that the Republic was returning, and wanted to be on the right side of it, and men who had been recruited by the charisma and conviction of Cassius and Brutus and hadn't fully thought through what they were actually agreeing to do. What they had all agreed to do in the end was simple and barbaric. They would surround Caesar in the Senate chamber, using the pretext of presenting a petition on behalf of a man whose exile they wanted reversed. In the close quarters of the meeting, with senators all around, they would produce daggers they had concealed under their togas, and they would stab him 23 times, as it turned out. Each conspirator was to strike at least once. This was Cassius's practical innovation, a way of ensuring that every man was equally implicated, equally blood-stained, equally unable to later claim he'd been merely a bystander. It was also, one cannot help thinking, a way of distributing the psychological weight of murder across 60 shoulders, so that no one man had to bear the full reality of what he had done. One detail that history records and that lodges itself in the mind like a splinter. When the men began to stab, several of them stabbed each other in the chaos. In the frenzy of the attack, in the close press of bodies and the panic of the moment, conspirators accidentally wounded conspirators. They had planned to kill one man and managed to injure themselves. This is the reality of murder that romance always papers over. It is messy. It is confused. It does not go as planned. The daggers slip. The angles are wrong. Men who have spent weeks imagining this moment cleanly find, in the actual moment, that it is nothing like the imagining. Let us go back to the streets of Rome that morning. Let us follow Caesar's litter through the city one last time. The procession moved from the Palatine Hill down through the streets toward the theatre of Pompey. Around him was the ordinary noise of a Roman morning. Vendors calling out their goods, the grinding of cartwheels on stone, the smell of bread from the bakeries, the sound of children. The city did not know what was about to happen, or most of it didn't. Somewhere in the crowd, men who knew were watching him pass. At some point during the journey, Caesar's litter passed the Haruspex Spurina. According to the ancient accounts, Caesar saw him and called out with a kind of teasing satisfaction. Those words again, "The Ides of March have come." And Spurina replied, "Aye, Caesar, but they have not yet gone." We do not know what Caesar's face looked like after that exchange. We know that he continued. Near the entrance to the theatre of Pompey, a man named Artemidorus, a Greek teacher who had somehow gathered information about the conspiracy, pushed through the crowd and tried to hand Caesar a written message. He apparently begged Caesar to read it immediately right then before going in. Caesar took the scroll, began to read it, but was repeatedly interrupted by petitioners and people pressing documents into his hands. He could not get through it. He ended up carrying the scroll, unread, into the meeting. This is the detail that undoes you, if you let it. The letter was in his hand, the warning was in his hand, and the morning itself conspired against him reading it, filling every quiet moment with noise and interruption, and the ordinary chaos of a powerful man in a public space. The Senate chamber of the Theatre of Pompey was a large rectangular room. At one end stood a statue of Pompey, the man Caesar had defeated in the civil war, the man whose death had begun the sequence of events that brought Caesar to this moment. The Senate was seated. Caesar entered and took his place, and then the petition began. A senator named Tillius Cimber stepped forward to present the case for his brothers recalled from exile. This was the pretext, the mundane bureaucratic request that would bring everyone close enough. Other senators crowded around Caesar to lend their voices to the petition, pressing in, pressing close. Caesar began to dismiss them. Cimber grabbed Caesar's toga. This was the signal. Casca, who was standing behind Caesar, struck first, aiming for the neck and catching the shoulder instead, a wound that did not incapacitate but did what it was supposed to do. It began. Caesar turned on Casca, grabbed Casca's arm, drove his stylus, a writing instrument, the only thing he had, into Casca's arm and shouted something in Latin that ancient sources render differently, but which amounted to, essentially, "Traitor, what are you doing?" And then the others came, all of them, all 60, or however many were present that day, accounts differ, descended on him at once. This is the part that the paintings always get wrong. They show it as somehow dignified, as a tableau, as men taking turns in a kind of terrible choreography. The reality was a mob, a panicked, surging, blade-wielding mob surrounding one man who, for all his greatness, was 55 years old with bad joints and epilepsy, and who had critically arrived unarmed to his own murder. He was surrounded on all sides. He could not run. He could not fight, not meaningfully, not against this. The accounts tell us that he did try to resist at first, grabbing at the blades with his hands which were presumably cut badly in the process. And then at some point he made a decision that is perhaps the most dignified act of the whole terrible scene. He stopped fighting. He pulled his toga up over his face and the lower half of his body, because even in this he was thinking about how he would be seen, about the image he would leave behind. He did not want to be found exposed. He did not want to be found undignified. He fell at the base of Pompey's statue. 23 stab wounds. Of those, only one was directly fatal, a wound to the chest that penetrated the heart or the major vessels around it. The others were, in their collective horror, largely unnecessary. Some were too shallow to do real damage. Some were in the wrong places. Some hit bone and slid off. It was not the clean, swift act of men who knew what they were doing. It was the desperate, repeated violence of men who were terrified, of men who had spent weeks telling themselves this would be a liberation, and were discovering, in the reality of the blood and the noise and the man falling, that liberation has a very specific and very terrible texture. Marcus Brutus stabbed him too. The sources are clear on this. Where on the body exactly is disputed. Whether Caesar saw him, whether Caesar said anything specifically to him in those final seconds, is the question that has obsessed literature and theatre for 2 millennia. Shakespeare gave us et tu, Brute, and while those precise words are almost certainly a playwright's invention, there is something in Plutarch's account, a gesture Caesar apparently made when he saw Brutus among the blades that suggests recognition, resignation, perhaps something that looked, from the outside, like acceptance. Within minutes, the theatre of Pompey was empty. The senators fled. The conspirators who had planned a triumphant march to the Forum to announce the liberation of the Republic were instead running through the streets, terrified by what they had done and by the silence that answered it. They had expected the Roman people to greet the death of the tyrant with rejoicing. The streets did not rejoice. The streets went quiet in the way that cities go quiet when something has happened that no one quite knows how to process yet. 3 slaves eventually entered the chamber. They found Caesar where he had fallen, at the base of Pompey's statue, and they carried him home in his litter. Home, to the house on the Palatine Hill where Calpurnia was waiting. She had known. She had known in the way that people who love someone know things they cannot explain. She had tried to tell him. She had sat with him in the dark before dawn and pressed her fear into his hands and asked him to stay. And he had almost stayed. And then a man he trusted had come and taken him away. The Rome that existed after March 15th, 44 BC was not the Rome the conspirators had imagined they were restoring. Within 18 months, Brutus and Cassius were dead, their armies defeated by Caesar's heir Octavian and his ally Mark Antony. The republic they had killed Caesar to save did not survive him by a generation. Octavian, who would rename himself Augustus, became, in time, everything that Caesar had been accused of wanting to become: the first true emperor, the founder of the system that would govern the Western world for centuries. The men who held the daggers had cut the thread they meant to preserve. They had accelerated the very thing they meant to prevent. Here is the thing about Julius Caesar that 2,000 years of analysis cannot quite resolve. He was not a naive man. He was not a careless man. He was one of the most perceptive, strategically brilliant human beings who ever drew breath on this particular planet. He had navigated decades of Roman political life, which was, in its intricate viciousness, essentially a contact sport with no protective equipment and very few rules. And he walked into that room. The warnings had arrived. From dreams, from priests, from letters, from whispers in the street, from the accumulated anxiety of everyone around him who was paying less close attention to their own greatness and more attention to the texture of the world they were moving through. They had arrived, and he had sorted through them and made his choice. There is a version of this story where Caesar was simply arrogant, where his colossal success had finally rotted his judgment from the inside, the way absolute power tends to do, and where the man who had been too clever for everyone else finally became too clever for himself. There is another version where he understood more than he let on, and chose to walk forward anyway, because he had decided, in that particular way that certain extraordinary people decide things, that a life spent hiding from death was not the kind of life he was willing to live. He had said, reportedly, that he would rather die suddenly than spend his days in fear of death, a sentiment that is either tremendously brave or tremendously convenient depending on your mood. And there is a third version, the one that feels most human and most true, the one that lives in the detail of the letter he carried all morning under his arm without opening, the version where he simply got busy, where the morning was too full, where there were too many people pressing too many documents into his hands, where the world kept interrupting him before he could get to the one piece of paper that mattered. The version where the most powerful man in the world was in the end just a man, running a little late, carrying too much, meaning to get to it, and then not getting to it. Sleep well tonight, and perhaps, before you set aside whatever is waiting on your own desk, on your own screen, in your own unread messages, whatever it is you've been carrying with you all day without opening, perhaps consider getting to it. Caesar would have, if only he'd had a little more time. Good night.